36,000 people in Fuzhou City urgently evacuated, subways, buses, and trains suspended. If China's Xi Jinping were to die, options for the post-CCP world. Crisis abounds, Xi Jinping busy fighting fires at home and abroad. It's all covered in today's China Truths. 36,000 people in Fuzhou City urgently evacuated, subways, buses, and trains suspended. Heavy rainfall due to Typhoon Haikui caused more than 80 waterlogged places in urban areas of Fuzhou, the largest city of Fujian Province, China. About 36,000 people were evacuated urgently on September 6. China's state television channel CCTV, citing the Fuzhou Meteorological Bureau, reported that after Typhoon Haikui made landfall in Fujian Province, the continuous heavy rainfall exceeded the historical record. According to statistics, the cumulative rainfall from 2100 hours on September 5 to 5 o'clock on September 6, the rainfall in 8 counties in Fuzhou City exceeded 100 millimeters. Among them, 925 towns and villages saw rainfall exceeding 250 millimeters. Gaishan Town in Songshan District witnessed the largest rainfall level at 250.4 millimeters, breaking the previous record, which was 240.4 millimeters. Due to the long duration and intensity of heavy rainfall, the water topped the inland rivers and channels. There were more than 80 waterlogged places in the urban areas. The maximum depth of the submerged road was recorded at 1.4 meters. Up to now, nearly 150 townships have been affected by the floodwater, with a total of more than 51,000 people affected, including more than 36,000 evacuated. There were 63 seriously flooded residential areas in the city. About 170 roads and 919 houses were damaged. All subway, buses, and passenger trains are suspended. A subway station issued an announcement on the morning of September 6, saying that due to the typhoon, there was water accumulation around the subway stations, so all the stations on the Fuzhou Metro network were suspended. According to the WeChat account SoutheastNet, many urban roads in Fuzhou were flooded, unable to operate normally, so Fuzhou urban bus lines were temporarily suspended. Fuzhou Railway Station also issued an announcement, saying that all passenger trains were suspended. If China's Xi Jinping were to die, options for the post-CCP world. Rumors of Xi Jinping's poor health in the wake of the BRICS summit on top of China's collapsing economy compel us to query how long the Chinese regime will last and what will succeed it. In his article, If China's Xi Jinping Were to Die, Options for the Post-CCP World, published September 5, Mr. Bradley A. Thayer discussed the situation and presented 3 possible models for the new China. The author is the Director of China Policy at the Center for Security Policy. Mr. Xi's health is a major wild card, and there are persistent rumors and physical indications that he has serious health problems beyond what a man entering his 70s would have. Were he to die or become incapacitated, there would be a leadership struggle akin to that after Mao Zedong's death. The scope of the struggle would be colossal, and much would depend on the calculus of the Chinese Communist Party's (CCP) leadership and the loyalty of the People's Liberation Army (PLA) and Ministry of State Security (MSS). Both organizations no doubt would themselves be riven by factionalism. The PLA and MSS would be key actors, with the former of great weight in this context. But either might generate Bonapartism and sustain, alter, or eliminate the Chinese regime depending upon his inclinations. This occasion would provide the greatest opportunity for the Chinese people or diaspora to act against the CCP, as it would be a period of maximal vulnerability for the party as Mao's death or Deng Xiaoping's. However, unlike after Mao's death, where the centripetal force of Maoism was still powerful, there is no such force. Unlike during Deng's tenure, the Chinese economy is plateauing or declining. Resistance to Deng's rule was eased by prodigious economic growth. As that is absent, there is the opportunity to move against the party to permit a transition to a single leader or a junta that, in turn, might permit a transition to a hybrid democratic form of government. The Chinese regime is vulnerable, and there are three candidates for a caretaker government: the Singapore Model, the Taiwan Model, and the Strongman or New Emperor Model. Given China's political history, the Strongman Model would be the most likely outcome. Singapore Model of Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew dominated Singapore's politics since its independence in 1965 and was Prime Minister until 1990. He remained influential as Senior Minister until 2004 and Minister Mentor until 2011. Lee was perhaps the most prominent advocate of both political pragmatism and Asian values or Confucian political principles, which heavily informed Singapore's politics. This model would offer the closest approximation to democracy of the three considered. There is an authoritarian regime, but it is benign, offering a soft authoritarian government that is not corrupt, eschews popularism, and advances civic nationalism through meritocracy, the rule of law, and long-term economic and social planning for the benefit of society. Taiwan Model. The Taiwan Model is defined by China's transition along the same path as the Republic of China, ROC, Taiwan's official name. That is, multiple decades-long transitions from a military junta under Chiang Kai-shek to an authoritarian regime and finally to a democratic regime. In this case, the Chinese military and security apparatus generate a junta that lasts for some time, perhaps decades. After this period, it would segue into an authoritarian regime that tolerates limited political participation. As with the Singapore model, this might be in place for decades before transitioning to democracy. Under the Taiwan model, China would also be non-liberal, even illiberal, in the end stage of the transition. Nationalism and ethnocentrism will also be potent and hinder relations with the West. The Taiwan model offers a well-known path for a CCP transition if it loses control after Mr. Xi's death or a profound domestic or international crisis. It has the promise of democracy if the multiple transitions can be successfully navigated. Strongman Model. The strongman scenario would be a new emperor akin to Oliver Cromwell during the English Civil War or Napoleon Bonaparte's coup in 1799 that overthrew the Directory for military dictatorship. In the Chinese context, the strongman model would be a return to China's politics in the first half of the 20th century, as evidenced by Sun Yat-sen or Chiang Kai-shek's rule. This would be a strong authoritarian rule under one leader. As the examples from Central and Eastern Europe demonstrate, post-communist transitions are always difficult. It would likely result in the rule of a strongman model as we witnessed in Russia and some former communist states in Central Europe like Vladimir Misiar in Slovakia in the 1990s or Slobodan Milosevic in Yugoslavia also in that decade. These had a difficult transition to democracy, and of course, Russia never transitioned to one. A Cromwell or Bonaparte would come from the PLA, party, or security apparatus as Russian President Vladimir Putin did. The leader would certainly appeal to China's greatness and advance a narrative that the country's greatness has been hindered by decades of CCP rule and nefarious foreign powers, such as Japan and the United States. If the CCP fails, then China will follow Russia's path toward increasing authoritarian rule. Post-communist China will be weak but possess a strong desire to restore past glories. This might be conceived as a return to Confucian principles of governance that informed the rule of dynastic China. There would be a pretense of democratic rule, but China would not be a democracy. The potential for abuse of the Chinese people is probable as human rights will not be advanced. In sum, China's political evolution will require multiple transitions. There will be a metamorphosis from the communist polity to the post-communist one. The post-communist polity is likely to undergo multiple subsequent transitions, each difficult and with ample risks associated with each one for stability in China and their implications for world politics. Moreover, a post-communist China will be ruled by a single, great leader, essentially an emperor, as it has been for almost all of China's past. This is due to China's political history, tradition, and culture, as well as to the external threat environment that China confronts, which will remain precarious for China. The final issue is the degree to which it will be a hybrid, incorporating some democratic elements into what is likely to be an authoritarian government led by a strong man or a junta for many decades, as occurred in Russia and China under Sun and Chiang before the Japanese invasion. Mr. Xi's mysterious ailments require an analysis of what will happen after his death or incapacitation and how the Chinese people and the diaspora can influence China's political evolution. This may be upon us sooner than we anticipate. Crisis abounds, Xi Jinping busy fighting fires at home and abroad. The Washington Post published a new article claiming that the top leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, is busy fighting the fires in many places at home and abroad. At home, Xi is encountering a deteriorating economy. China's economic growth has been slowing, a post-COVID pandemic surge petered out, and deep structural problems are undermining the country's future prospects. Abroad, the Chinese leader faces an increasingly hardline consensus in the West against Beijing. At the same time, China is confronted by ongoing friction with regional powers and neighbors. In the article, the columnist Ashan Tharoor said that Xi Jinping and the communist ruling clique are struggling to address the new challenges posed by China's maturing economy. China's population is shrinking and aging, which raises questions over the potential productivity of a graying workforce. At the same time, the youth unemployment rate in urban areas has climbed to such alarming levels that the government decided to stop publishing the relevant data this summer. The world's second-largest economy once seemed the new engine of the world, but a sense of stagnation in China's economy is quietly spreading, which can be seen in both macroeconomic data and the pessimism of young people. To add insult to injury, it is unlikely for the Chinese government to repeat the massive stimulus for infrastructure projects and real estate construction, because China's overheated real estate sector is already deeply indebted amid tight investment and scars from a harsh lockdown during the COVID pandemic. In the past, the mammoth stimulus helped power China out of the global financial crisis in 2008 and allowed Chinese authorities to crow about the superiority of the Chinese model compared with the West's crisis-hit democracies. A decade and a half later, China's cash is tighter. Some of its major property developers are on the verge of collapse. The Chinese Communist Party's authoritarian grip over virtually all facets of life in the country is arguably making the situation worse. Ian Johnson, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a longtime China watcher, said in the article, the government's pursuit of total control has set the country on a path of slower growth and created multiplying pockets of dissatisfaction. Even Chinese companies are trying to relocate overseas. Johnson's colleague David Lynch added that China's current economic slowdown had a chain reaction on the world stage. It underscores a shift in the country's global image. He explained, for years, China's vast domestic market beckoned multinational corporations with the promise of enormous profits. And it seemed certain to surpass the United States as the world's largest economy. But now, such optimistic sentiment has disappeared as China's outlook is less rosy. China's economy posted a pretty lackluster performance in the second quarter of this year given the pace-setting dynamism of its economy over the past 3 decades. China is weathering considerable geopolitical headwinds. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo during her trip to China last week warned that the prevailing uncertainty, stoked also by Beijing's tough actions against foreign businesses, is making China uninvestable in the eyes of U.S. investors. According to Naomi Wilson, Vice President of Policy at the Information Technology Industry Council, Chinese authorities need to recognize that they can no longer rely on the sheer mass of their market to attract that type of foreign investment. In addition, even Chinese companies have also been working hard to relocate their operations outside China. China's bully pushes its neighbors towards the U.S. Recent surveys of global public opinion have found largely negative views of China's influence in global affairs, including in middle-income countries outside the West. In Asia, the United States has steadily strengthened its network of alliances and partnerships with China's neighbors, who are concerned about China's increasingly aggressive behavior. Chinese officials are unhappy with the suggestion that it is their country, not the U.S. empire, that poses a threat to stability and order. But Beijing can't seem to help itself. China's Ministry of Natural Resources last week released the China 2023 Standard Map claiming sovereignty over large swaths of territory in neighboring countries such as India, triggering a diplomatic dispute with New Delhi. Sources said that Xi Jinping will not attend this week's G20 summit of 20 major economies in the Indian capital. Xi's control of power stems from maintaining legitimacy of his rule. The columnist Ishan Tharoor said Xi Jinping's apparent approach to the moment is doubling down on his hardline nationalism. A decade ago, some experts still imagined that the Chinese leadership would steer the economy to a more liberalized, market-oriented future. But due to the internal power struggle within the Chinese Communist Party, Xi had to embark upon rounds of purges and crackdowns. Of course, it has affected the ranks of China's political elites and its private sector. China's technology companies have lost hundreds of billions of dollars in value in recent years due to the government's crackdown. Capable technocrats in key positions were dismissed and replaced. State-owned enterprise managers and corporate executives are required to study Xi Jinping thought, similar to past homages to Maoism. Tharoor believes that centralizing power and control is crucial for Xi, and this reflects his weakness. Wang Chunhan, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, said that Xi's right to rule is inextricably linked with the CCP's legitimacy, and his power cannot be separated from the party's political machinery. What is good for the CCP does not mean it is good for China. Ian Johnson warned in the article that what Xi Jinping does is good for the CCP, but may not be good for the country. He said that China's economic problems are part of a broader process of political ossification and ideological hardening. For those who have observed the country closely over the past few decades, it is difficult to ignore the signs of China's new national stagnation. This discomfort could have far-reaching consequences for years to come. Chen Ling, an assistant professor at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, said that, so far, no one can challenge Xi Jinping politically, but economic performance has always been at the heart of the regime's legitimacy. It affects Xi's ability to govern the country. William Hurst, professor of China development at the University of Cambridge, said that things always slowly deteriorate until they suddenly collapse. He warned that China's potential financial crises may have steep social and political costs. Don't forget to comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths, and thank you for tuning in.